back to Truth and Rhythm. I'm your host, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine, and we're here again with Arnell Carmichael, singer-guitarist from Raydio, looking to get Raydio back in a heavy rotation and turning it on again, once again with Mr. Arnell Carmichael. Welcome back.
Hi, how are you guys? How's everybody doing?
All right.
Scott?
Glad to have you back, Arnell. So, when we finished last time, we pretty much wrapped up the first record, and that was fun. So we're going to move on and talk about Rock On, which was the second one. And, you know, for me personally, I think probably my favorite Raydio album, just because you guys really caught fire, you know, and you really, I think, got comfortable in what you were doing and kind of took it even to another level, in my opinion. So can you talk about the process of creating that record and what you remember about it?
Yeah, just as you say, yeah, I think the maturity did happen. Ray, as a writer, and then now there were a lot of other areas that kind of happened with that, and that was the studio American was now a brick and mortar building, which was on Lancashire in North Hollywood. I'm now officially moving my family back from Detroit because I was going back and forth a lot, even though I had maintained that like in a condo in that area. Well, no, I was actually in the Hollywood area, west, east, I don't know. Anyway, I know I was in Hollywood, and we, as a family, we were moving closer to where the records were being recorded. That apartment was on Tahunga, which is around the block from the building. So how that altered with the sound was everybody was kind of together better. You know, we had just came off a tour. Ray was writing a lot of songs, which I thought was really interesting. He used to carry around a micro cassette, and I got to do this in front of people. He used to always be talking on this micro cassette, and I was like, what the heck is he doing, you know? So then he told me, he's like, yeah, well, I got the music, and I'm recording it. Even when I first met him, he would call me on the phone, which was one of the biggest things that I ever seen a young person do, or any writer for that matter. He would call me and kind of get the keys and sing this and do that on the phone. So by the time we get off the second tour, my son is born, all of that's going on. He had a lot of the songs that he wanted, the tracks, which was, I thought was pretty amazing, because again, I was still getting through this and learning, and I felt, okay, the other part that for me, I felt like, you know what, this is a graduation or coming out where I don't have so much competition, because Jerry Knight at that point, which would be the controversy of Rock On, is that he's no longer coming around. We had lost another friend, Vincent Bonham, who was one of the original starting members for that Raydio album, the first one. Charles Fearing, my brother, Darren Carmichael, who hadn't officially changed his name to London Carmichael yet, who stuck around for some of the first recording, but was really used as the drummer on the second one. So he became a member, and that was the kind of like the setting. And then, of course, American being torn down as a dentist's office was being set up, one-room studio. It was very interesting, that period, because I actually saw a studio being built. Steve Hallquist came aboard, which is a very, very excellent engineer. He's the master engineer now, because he's done so much for Disney since then, where he's had like 25, 30 young engineers under him. He was there. I think his father, he told me, his father worked for Yuri, which was a a preamp company that designed a certain kind of preamp equipment. And Ray had all these slew of connections. Reggie Dozier as an engineer was there a lot, and Paul Jackson, all of these people and more. I'm not even naming like 1/3 of them, but there was so many people that it was the place to be. Mary Ray Can Studio was the place to be.
Was he also Norma Jean Bell?
Excuse me, what'd you say? I had a beep there.
Norma Jean Bell also, right?
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting that you said that, because even at a point of this interview we're doing, right, I thought to myself, what would have been one of the highlights? Well, Norma Jean Bell playing on You're in Need of Love was a highlight for me, because before Raydio, the Carmichael movement, she used to be the musical director for our band.
Wow.
Her, because she left us to go play with Stevie Wonder and Frank Zappa. So when I got there, now I'm staying there, because before I was, you know, migrating there. But anyway, it was just awesome, you know. So yeah, you're right, Norma Jean Bell. That's a very good call, marking, you know. So it was a lot of fun. I think that's Rock On has More Than One Way to Love a Woman on it.
Yeah, I'll just give
I should know the songs,
about
but
a few of those tracks. So Rock On had What You Waiting For. It had Hot Stuff. It had Rock On. It had When You're in Need of Love. And of course, You Can't Change That. And this was the cover picture.
Oh yeah, I do know the cover picture. It's like it never goes away.
Oh, are you still trying to live that down or something?
Oh yeah. So funny. But yeah, I think it just was such an energetic album in terms of the feeling for me. I didn't have the competition of Jerry Knight and trying to wonder what I was going to sing on. It basically was Ray and myself, you know, going through a lot of the project. And on all of the projects, I stayed up with him. When you say in the other part one, where you say, well, you know, I go on to work with him on Sex and a Single Girl. I used to stay up with him many hours. From we get to the studio at maybe and wouldn't go home till 8 o'clock the next morning. Even working on Ghostbusters, he called me at 2 or 3 in the morning to come do a part, and I was like, really? On another song? And I knew I was not, you know, I knew that Raydio wasn't the group at that time, but the group that helped him out on that record. So Rock On, a lot of stories about Rock On.
Yeah. So, well, and you guys went on an amazing tour as part of that too, and I want to talk about that too. So I was actually at that tour. I think we talked off air about it. Opening for Bootsy. The show I saw was at the LA Forum. Mind-blowing show by Bootsy, and it was packed. I mean, 17,000 sold out, and Enchantment opened. Right. You guys, I think Enchantment opened. Then you guys, and I was also talking to Tom Vickers recently. I don't know if you know him from the P-Funk Empire back then, and he was talking about that he went with the tour to the UK or Europe, and so you guys also went overseas. So
yeah,
talk
we
a little
did
bit about that.
Well, the UK was the interesting part of it, because that my father was a major artist. Now I know we're talking about Raydio, but I have to go because we were at Hammersmith Odeon, and well, actually, I guess it had to be with Bootsy, because I'm not sure if it's Rick James or Bootsy, but I know on that show we opened, and Heatwave came on second, and then I think Bootsy came on third. In the process, Ray tells, you know, like, you're there, you're backstage, you're on the stage, and power went out, and we still had to perform 2 songs in a cappella. Vincent talks about it all the time, because he was still at that time on that date. So no, it was early. That was early. The first time we went to England, it was actually with we switched over to the Rick James thing. But again, what goes down in all of this is that it was a major event for me because my father discovered his records were bigger in Birmingham, England than Motown. So that was a trip. I was like, really? So yeah, that part of it was special in that light. And I remember how good Heatwave was. Because when we first broke out with the record on Arista, Heatwave was a brand new artist. Just like we were. And boy, oh boy, I thought, man, that's a really great group,
They were very,
but then
they were very energetic on stage.
Yeah, they were. And they had a very good making records, just like Ray did. So it was, being in England at that time, watching Johnny Wilder throw his microphone around, like I think James Brown or somebody used to do this, but anyway, he did this like an amazing microphone trick, and our thing was just singing and having fun on the stage. And a lot of people in England can't forget that. I think that the firewall came down because the staging there and curtain that would come down on the stage. So if the building caught on fire, it wouldn't go into the audience or whatever. So, that actually came down on our show. It was funny. Pretty funny, but it's very, very, that it also, here's another part of it what no one would know. That was where Jerry Knight would get together. Larry didn't do it. And Mutiny. And Jerry, I'm sorry, but I'm telling the truth. I was not, before we went on the tour, I was in Detroit. So I flew from Detroit to England. And by the time I got there and settled in, the talk had started that Jerry was dating or courting, or however you want to look at it, the president of Arista in England. So he was meeting all these people because they were session musicians. He had played with Bill Withers, and so he just felt that this wasn't enough. Whatever was being offered was not enough, and it was his time to make his move. And so I got a call from Ray to find out which direction I was going to go in signing. And I said, I'm not worried about this. If you guys agree, or it seems to be fairly decent. I didn't get a lawyer because I knew from my father's dealings, like the start of a deal. I even told Ray, I said, the start of a deal. This is the start of a deal. So it's a decent start. I can, make a living from that. And we went on to do that stuff. England, it's very interesting because there's so much attached to that. What else? It was something great. It was something even bigger that I'm missing now when I think about it. So we had the records being made, and that England trip I'm talking about, which was more important than the other ones, is everybody was growing. That trip made the maturity of the next record for sure. I can say that for sure.
What was your encounters with Bootsy like?
My accounts of Bootsy, what a lot of people don't know is that I was at the time more of an introvert. I would become more extrovert when we were performing. So I didn't really hang out with a lot of people. And I know what it was about that tour that was even more special, and I missed it. Was they met Bob Marley on that tour, on those dates going over to England. Bootsy tour, the highlight for me of just the Bootsy family of musicians was Mudbone and Catfish was who everybody talked about. For Bootsy, he was being a star, and I heard his articles and I heard some of his interviews long since all of that. And he said something that I thought was very interesting. And he said, man, I was just trying to be the guy running it. I didn't want to know about this, and I didn't want to do all of that. I didn't want to do the business. I just wanted to be an artist. you know, because now when you're the leader of it, the bills and everything come to you and you have to do it all in interviews. So when I saw his interview and he said that, I could understand it because it was so much. Like there's video of Raydio and all of us on stage with Bootsy, and it had to be at least 25, 30 people. I always thought that was crazy, you know, on the stage. Even as we came in on our set, we would come back in, and when he goes, "Who's going to tear this mother down?" and all of us, Yak would be on the stage shouting out, "Bootsy, Bootsy" to the crowd. Bootsy was a very, very energetic artist to start his career. To, you know, of course not start, but I say the star of Bootsy, because I didn't even know who Bootsy was. I'll be honest. My background was not into that kind of funk, but to see it was like, oh my God, we are really doing something, you know.
Well, and they were so tight.
Yeah, it was a very, very good band for what they did. It was very, very good. I think Catfish had a lot to do with it too, because, you know, those guys playing with James Brown, me and Vincent Bonham, I've talked to him quite a lot. Here's what we thought and think, and I can say it. Bootsy would be the start of funk, of the real funk that everybody deals with. And he might be the longest living artist of that because of how long, where he started at. Because he comes before Sly when you deal with James Brown, and he was with James Brown, Bootsy was. So he goes through maybe 30, 40, 50, maybe 50 years of funk. Okay. You're not gonna, I know George Clinton wants to say that, but when Bootsy came to George Clinton, he brung them alive. They were not funking.
he taught George the one.
Yeah, he did. That's exactly right. Yeah. You know, my experience with that phrase, the one, would be a drummer from Energy. His name is, you have to give him credit, Eric Wallace. Never forget, I was in California and we all used to stay close because we all love each other. And he said, "Arnell, don't you know that one is where you put it?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He was like, "There's 4 beats in a phrase. And whatever you emphasize, whether it's 4 or whether it's 3 or whether it's 2, it is and will be forever the one." So I didn't know, because I wasn't really a musician. I had taken classes, but when I heard that, it stuck with me to this day, of the phrasing of what happens with music. You know, Michael Henderson's ideas, funk is the space, you know, in between a beat, like the silence, and after you hit it, and then, you know, here's this emphasis of music. So everybody has a description, but for sure, absolutely, Scott, I will agree with you that Bootsy Collins taught George Clinton funk, the one. He taught him how to be on the one.
I got 2 questions right now for you about Ray at that point. Mm-hmm. One, how did he feel about his singing when he was he a little how
did I feel about what?
How did Ray at that point, Ray Parker, feel about his singing? Was he still a little shy about it and trying to get his footing as a singer?
People are going to see this. I don't mean to interrupt, but I have to say this because I know what you're saying now. I was instrumental in telling him, and many of his friends were, of singing. I thought when it was him and I that, you know, this will be good for him, and of course great for me because I'm a better singer. But Ray was shy and thought that he may lose, you know, I guess a certain amount of it, but he was really going after who he wanted to be, you know. And I didn't think I'd be here this long, so I was like, you know what, it's his deal. He does a lot of the work for it. I mean, we're all accompanying what he's doing, so he should sing. So he brought a song to me that I sang all the way through, and I loved the version of it. I was so excited, and that song was "A Woman Needs Love," and I actually sang that all the way through. But he had written that song with some of his lady friends, who, you know, and so he began the mark of really singing a song. It was "A Woman Needs Love." And that's now 4 albums later from the start, where he had already been singing. But that has been for a lot of fans, which is to this day why I still get calls and interviews, and everybody wants to ask me all kind of mountains of questions, and I would actually have to say that I was still an encourager of him singing too. Like, he should sing. It's his. He writes the songs. He's doing the project. He owned the studio. I mean, what more can you say?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, and then also just going back a bit to the Bootsy thing. You know, the sound of Raydio at that point, there's a lot of like rubbery kind of popping kind of sound in the bass and the rhythm that to me reminds me a little bit of some of what Bootsy did. Do you think there was any influence as part of that tour that carried over into some of the funk element of Raydio?
Well, I want to say this. Where we all, excuse me, where we all came from. And it's very interesting because I saw George Clinton before I even dealt with Ray Parker Raydio. It had a group called, what's the name of that stupid group? Excuse me, George, but I had to say that because it's just for my own thought. It had a record, I Just Want to Testify. We used to do that
The Parliaments.
record so much as Parliament. So we used to do that record so much that I was like way into before he got with Bootsy. But that we are all dealing with was a feeling which I would have to attach to funk even before I knew what the one was. By the time we Bootsy or that, we pretty much understood what to do with music.
Hey, we're back. We had a bit of a technical issue on a different, better device, and back to Arnell.
Yeah, the influence of Bootsy in terms of their brand of funk and what Ray Parker was doing, to me, my opinion, as I said, we were at that point of me knowing that we sang as a cover, I Just Want to Testify by the Funkadelics. Well, as it goes on, we were around a lot of musicians, and they used to play everything. So the sophistication between the two was quite different. And by the time I got to the Bootsy camp, I had a better understanding of what funk would feel like. Ray probably knew what it was and probably in his mind, you know, chose the particular grooves because, you know, his writing was very close and similar to a lot of different artists. If you listen to our records, they're so mimicky of artists, but then with such a great blend to make us achieve popularity. No samplers at the time, so you become a strong sense of who you are because, you know, we didn't have samplers and all of that. So I can remember something that happened that showed the influence on Charles Fearing, who was a guitar player in Raydio with the Bee Gees. He came with an intro of one of Ray's songs, More Than One Way to Love a Woman, and it had this Bee Gees feel to it in the beginning. And I said, oh, here we go with this Bee Gees sound, you know, because I was not really into the Bee Gees as much as I should have been. But anyway, respect to the guys in the Funkadelic and Bootsy clan. We were just more on a popular trend of music to me. Bootsy and George with this cutting edge sound of theirs that would then make them who they are. What I remember very well is that Raydio coming to tour with Bootsy, we brought a whole lot of different people they never expected to come. You know, and as a new group, I knew that right away because even when we were with Frankie Beverly, when we did some stuff with Frankie Beverly, we were on the stage performing, and we did the first album, and by the time we got through like 7 songs, the 8th or 9th song was Jack and Jill, and the crowd didn't know who we were. But by the time we got to the end of the show and the Jack and Jill played, it was an amazing attraction, and it started going all over the country because the records, every record, and I mean every record, was played on that first album. Second album had a lot too, but not like the first one. The first one was in an incredible hodgepodge of just songs everywhere, you know. And so that's what we brung to some of the funk environment was. I guess I should say we bring a lot of white people because they liked us a lot, you know, at the time in the 70s.
You guys had more crossover. Yeah.
Yeah, the at the time funk was growing. That's what we were talking about in terms of how it would mature. Well, you know, all of it. They just helped Ray out, you know, helped us out in terms of allowing us to be on their tours, and we did learn and used it where we could.
What was it like, Arnell? I'm sure you made a lot of TV appearances at that point because you'd had some hits. And what was it like for you? And especially saying you were kind of an introvert doing the TV stuff.
Well, that's an interesting story because there is one. Dinah Shore show. There was a opportunity, of course, of Ray and radio at the time to be on a Dinah Shore show. So of course, because I'm singing, and Jerry was, if I remember, I don't think he was there, but anyway, so we're doing Jack and Jill, and Dinah Shore herself came up to me because of my dancing and my singing. She was like, "Hi, Ray, how are you?" And so the management stopped everything, and I was like, "No, I'm not Ray, but how you doing?" You know, and so they were like, "What?" And she was shocked. She was like, "You're not Ray, but you're so good." And you know, that never made the tape. They actually redid the whole thing because of that. So I experienced that a lot. You know, we did a lot of interviews, and I just kind of, after that, I started realizing, like, you know, what was going on, and I kind of started keeping to myself, you know. But so anyway, yeah. But Dinah Shore show, that was a great show, and that would be a really unique experience.
Yeah, I'd like to see that clip somewhere. That should be on YouTube.
Yeah, it should be. It's not though, but yeah.
So I think you mentioned Cavallo and Ruffalo. Were those guys were
Cavallo, Ruffalo. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know they also were involved with Prince. Did you ever have an occasion to meet Prince because of that?
Yeah. All very, very great questions. And I almost want to tell you, like, this stuff could go on and on because there's so much stuff. We were in New York. Ray got a call that his managers was going to meet him on tour, and they wanted him to stop in Minneapolis. And they actually went to see Prince. They actually brung Prince with Ray in mind to produce some of the records. And what I later found out from Ray was that Prince liked the recording sound of Raydio, how it was recorded. And Ray, as a young 19-year-old man, had one of the only recording studios, and that he wanted that sound. And Ray actually talked to Prince, and they became friends. He says they were friends before then, but I don't know because I didn't meet Prince until we got back to California. But we actually stopped by, and Prince and Ray became friends and associates of recording from that date back then. And I think that was somewhere like in the Rock On process when Rock On was the record, because I didn't see him before then. And on that stable of artists for Cavallo and Ruffalo's managers also was Earth, Wind & Fire, and a lot of many other great artists. So we met so many people, especially we did No Nukes, Jackson Browne, and did a lot of just popular stuff.
That makes sense because I had heard also that Maurice White was put forward to produce Prince's first album, and Prince wanted to do it himself. So
yeah, that is definitely correct because at the time, Ray beat Maurice White in building a studio. Maurice hadn't built his I can't think of the name of it, but he hadn't built that one yet anyway. And the idea that they shared was the studio had to have at least 6 or 7 layers because of the airplanes in LA. flying over the buildings. And so he had his building, I think it was he had built a 6-story building, Maurice did, Arc Records. And Ray, of course, had American Studio. So we would see them a lot. We would see Maurice, Philip, and Verdine a lot, back and forth. And so I would imagine that when Prince came around, all of these people were available to him. I even heard stories, which I don't know, but I would believe it, that Patrice Rushen actually was one of the musicians who played on his first album. So
yeah, I heard he was a fan of hers.
Yeah, we all knew he was coming though before it happened.
Yeah. Wow. So this must have been not such a big deal to you because you were accustomed to the whole Detroit thing, rubbing all the elbows with all those guys.
Well, and you're right, but that was one of the things that I had to deal with later on in life, was that, you know, coming from a family where your father has a record company and you are pursuing your career based upon artists and people that you meet, it kind of made me a little ahead in knowledge. So I had a different perspective than most who already were trying to make the career happen. So you're right. I was kind of already at a point where I wanted what I wanted, but you couldn't really politically just blurt it out and say, hey, this is what I wanted, because you'd look at like you were cocky. And at the time I was told that I was that, but I couldn't see it, you know, at the time. Yeah, it's kind of different.
Let me ask you about another executive, very famous one, Clive Davis. So, you know, he was the guy at Arista then. And I've talked to a lot of other artists who went to Arista, black artists, you know, like Gil Scott-Heron and a lot of them. They were trying to get in on that at that time. And it didn't always work out that well, you know, with what Clive envisioned and what the band envisioned. So do you have any stories about Clive Davis?
Yeah, I want to be careful, but I want to say this. I only met him like twice, and it was respectful at the time. And because we were signed to Ray's production and Ray was the artist on Arista, my pursuit should have been to let me get to know this guy, let me try to figure out if I could, you know, mature into my own deal, which I did get a chance to do before it all fell apart. But I pretty much didn't want to have anything to do with Arista because I felt my identity was stolen. When I started reading articles and interviews where my name was no longer mentioned, but the songs Ray had written, and I knew that was coming from the management and from Arista. So I didn't pursue that because I had other problems. And I still could look back to Clive Davis as we talk about him and say, that's a pretty smart guy, because he dealt with musicians, singers, and music in a whole totally different manner than Berry Gordy or my father, Mike Hanks, and many other, Gamble and Huff and all of the many other artists. But he wasn't afraid of putting together a large enough strategy because, again, which a lot of people may not talk about, you know, we're now talking about the 70s. And we had just came out of the 60s, which had a lot of riots and all those things in it. So the opportunity that Clive had was different than what Berry Gordy would have. Because Berry Gordy, if he was making records and he was dealing with marketing campaigns, he would be coming from an urban perspective into an environment, where Clive would be coming from an suburban effective market, but he just needed urban guys. Because Victor Givens, Richard Smith, I could tell you, I mean, I was so far into this and knew the promotion guys that worked and helped Clive bring us, Jerry Griffith, all these people who worked to bring a black act, that I was proud to be, along with Ray, attached to Arista, and we actually would vocalize our opinions to Ray. Ray would then vocalize it to the management companies and take it back, and it would hit Clive that the kind of marketing that radio should have. So, and even if you watch Unsung, which the Ray Parker version, you will hear him say he didn't know what to do with the group. Ray's opinions and the opinions of others did affect him greatly by the time he got to Whitney Houston, because Whitney Houston wasn't on the label yet. And so for Ray's Records to have the marketing crew that it had, we were everywhere. And as a young guy, I mean, I'm older than Ray at the time, but still I view myself as being fortunate and young to see something so massive. I mean, the biggest of that campaign should be talked about in books. And I actually got one of my close friends now, Armando Rivera, who was a program director in R&B or whatever, in the radio factor of music. He came to me and said, hey, your name, your information, radio, Arnell Carmichael, Ray Parker, Jerry Knight, and he was going crazy about it's in their information of radio stations, So Clive did a massive job. If I can't say anything else great, I will say that, okay, that makes sense, what he did to get into the market, to be able to sell records on both sides of the fence.
Arnell, I'll say, the first show we did, one of the viewers asked, a question that I'm going to share with you. And that was there ever an opportunity or talk about Ray maybe producing a record for you as doing sort of an outshoot of
Yeah, I have copies of that. There's so much that we probably have to do a fourth part, whatever. But my energy and what I wanted to do, there was an album. At the time, you got to remember, for everybody who was asking that question, that you had even more competition of other people who wanted a deal, who wanted to be a part of being on a lacquer record, 45, 33, whatever it was, the process. So when I was talking to Ray about it, there were me, Jerry Knight, and another young man named Randy Hall. So everybody's records was going to happen. Jerry didn't want to wait because he actually came back. Like he had left and was trying to come back into the fold. But it couldn't happen because now you got Randy Hall, who put out such a great record, his first record, I'm in Love with Jamie's Girl, great record. I actually did some background in engineering because I had learned from Steve on that record. But for me, we had ran into the guys from the group, I think Brian Fairweather and Martin Page were with Jefferson Starship, I'm not sure, but they came, we did all these records, and there was another guy, John Leon, that there is audio that was created for me. But I had, at the time, a personal life problem with my marriage. And my stepfather was very sick and he was dying. So my goals were to push harder, because everybody wants more money. And it was the first time in my life that I actually said to Ray, I got to have this, I got to have that. But at the time, imagine all this is going on. So now you got this, the second enhancing of the studio, because second room is being built. Jerry Knight trying to come back, Randy Hall trying to get involved, me asking for a record, and Ghostbusters just being pushed by CBS and Arista to the top. So Ray's like being pulled to go where all these different places, and it just wasn't in the cards. It just didn't happen. So I left, and that was a boost where I got from Ollie Brown, where I was with the Daz Band. There's music with me, having did some tracks with the Daz Band. Then I had another project with a Lionel Vinyl production company, Joe Vitarelli and Edgy Lee, where we do, because I went out with Tina Marie and my brother, and when he was with QT Hush and they were backing him, that I did a record with Lionel Vinyl. And the single would have been with me and Tina Marie, which is there's a copy or part of it on A String. That would have happened. But again, my personal life was so
turmoil.
Yeah, and I don't want to hold any ill will against her because, at the time we were young, and I didn't realize that I should have not got married, but it was just one of those kind of things where it just wasn't in the cards. I didn't, and trust me, because I was not this, as everybody thought I was arrogant, but I was not this really blaringly arrogant person, and I didn't care. I was like, you know what, I ain't gonna worry about it. I gotta go do it in my life. So I actually quit. To a lot of people that don't know, I stopped. I became an executive vice president to a CD manufacturing plant. Going back farther, after leaving Ray, I went to school and got my certified for, I think, ASCII and Fortran or some other kind of language for writing software programs. And I used to, it was hard for me to get to this one because I said, I can't imagine all of this. I can't even tell you how it felt for two places because it was so much of me wanting to keep my family together that I just left it. I had to actually just walk away. So Ray would still call me. Like I went 10 years, maybe 10, 12 years before we even spoke. And he calls me up one day and he says, you know what, I need you. And I said, what you talking about? He was like, you got to come back and sing these songs. I was like, no. He was like, yeah. And so we were doing some dates over in Japan, and I saw Jerry again. This had to be like in the 90s or something. And 2 years after that, or not far after that, Jerry Knight died. And it was like really weird to go through all of this, watch. I mean, Scott, I had watched all of these groups who were just beginners have their whole career. And I'm behind some computer being a tech guy and or with a CD manufacturing company, which is a part of Ricochet and all of that. So to right now to be where I am is really cool to be able to tell you a lot. And for those who say, well, how come what happened? I had a guy tell me, and it may not be best to say it, but he was going, man, I would have just ended my life. I was like, no, I have more to live for. Yeah. Radio, music, Jack and Jill, you can't change that. There's so many stories that we don't even have time because it was a wonderful experience. Me and Ray are still real cool. I was just at his studio. He just built in his house and extension on. He's still doing his thing. He's supposedly to make a new record, 1984, to pick up maybe where we all stopped at or something, but I'm now a jazz musician. I've been working with, before he passed away, Alan Barnes of Blackbirds. We used to do a Blackbirds review version for him. And I knew all the guys anyway, but and I had a chance to write a song on the Blackbirds' last record before Alan Barnes passed away. Used to call him and go, Alan, what would happen if I could play the guitar? And he was like, if you could play the guitar, man, you will never have nothing to worry about. So me and him got together and he taught me a lot more. I knew about the technical side of it and I knew about the playing side of it because the guy that I worked with was like this fabulous guitar player. So I had no problems in like re-entering, especially after Unsung. That Unsung just caused more people to say, where is this guy and what is he doing and what happened? And, so I'm pretty cool.
I'm very glad to hear that. And I've seen some of the clips on YouTube, and I encourage viewers to go check them out just from, the past couple of years. And you're playing some sweet guitar and you're doing some jazzy stuff. And it's cool. Oh, yeah. And I especially liked the version.
And I put up everything raw too. No, whatever mistakes and all, I'm doing it.
Hey, that helps. That makes it real, man. Yeah. I really liked I Can't Help It, the version you did of that.
Oh, that, now let me, I got to tell you this story because that is a very interesting moment in my life. Right before I started all of this CD manufacturing and all of that, and I actually was graduating from the school and got my software thing and went and got this job working for medical automation. And I quit this job. My boss was not doing what I thought was right. And after having been with Raydio, I had learned, no, I can't do this. So I go into his office and I say, you know what? I'm shipping all of my equipment from California and my studio equipment. I'm out of here. So now I got a studio in the basement of where I live. And my mother, who at the time when I wrote my first song, she would go, you got to write better songs. And I didn't understand. So I set up the studio in her house so that I would have, just quiet and not anybody where I lived. And so anyway, so I come and I'm writing a song and I'm working on it and I'm in a relationship. So I didn't know how to explain my emotion. And so I wrote, I can't help but say I'm sorry. And it sounded so close to a radio record. I was like, oh, this is going to be a smash. And I didn't think it was a great record. And I played it for my mother before she died. And she even said that was a really nice song. And I did a lot of trying to push it and trying to get a lot of people to get into it, and started opening my own shows as Arnell Carmichael, from Raydio. But so anyway, it wasn't the same. It's a harder road, and unless you're a younger guy who's not influenced like I was, and you have all these people trying to help you, when I did have a deal, the record companies were talking about hip hop. They were talking about, well, why should I give you 200,000 when I can give this young guy like 40,000 and he goes out and I make $1 million? So that record was a mark of me saying, I don't want to sound like this anymore. And I love that record. I said, I can't do the pop thing from where I am and try to get into the race. I like music enough because of my father's experience, my experience as a young artist. I've seen the mountaintop, as people would say. And so I picked jazz because my stepfather, he would always, when we were younger, which I didn't say, but here's another influence, he would play a lot of jazz. His father owned El Casino, which was a lounge in Detroit, and they had a pool hall, and he used to go visit his friends who were playing with Count Basie, Sonny Stitt, and all these other guys. It was his friends. And I was influenced. I used to sing, chances are that I wear a silly grin, So I used to do all those kind of things. Yeah, Johnny Matheson, met him too. So I picked jazz. I said, you know what, if I'm going to re-enter this world, this environment again, I'm going to do it as a different person. And that's what I'm doing now, is jazz songs and R&B and, little R&B, not a lot, but enough that what is should be said is the radio show is where everybody can see me now. I created, and, Ray had given me permission to do this, and I just didn't do it because there are more things in life to music. Music is everywhere, and now it's getting more respect. It may not have as many record company executives, but it has enough that you can create your own career. So that's what I have now, is the radio show. Ooh, I'm about to sneeze. Arnell Carmichael is a jazz musician. I do a lot of club work, so I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I've seen, especially lately, some promotions coming out for that. And you want to talk a little bit more about that, what you're doing with Arnell Carmichael and Raydio, and maybe people can come see you?
Well, again, I want to say this. Ray, told me that I could have did this a long time ago, but at the time I didn't want to do it. So I just thought it was no more chance of this, and I should go on with my life. And Unsung then comes out, and I'm finding more people are calling me. And so I said, well, what do I want to do? So I got a call from a young guy who wanted to work with me, but he had an amazing amount of things to do. And I said, well, this is what we'll do. We'll create a celebration of what radio was, or what it is to people. Because now we're talking, Scott, what is it, like 40 years later?
It went by like that.
So I said, let me do the radio show. I have my cousin, James Carmichael. I have Geronimo Rogers. I even have one of the original members, Vincent Bonham. I've got a young drummer, Chris Thomas, also Wendell Lucas, who's an excellent bass player. and myself, and Therese Rose, took Therese because she always says, you said my name wrong, but anyway, Therese Rose. We have what I call the radio show. It is a production, more so than a group, where we do the songs, but we also do Jerry Knight songs, and we also can reach into Ray's catalog, which is a song I love. I really wanted to be on it, didn't happen because I wasn't around, which is Ready or Not, which was written by Ray and Herbie Hancock. So I get to put up, yeah, great song. So I get to put all of these songs together, and promoters, which is the other thing too. You guys stop saying that Ray Parker sounds like that. I sound like Ray Parker. No, I sound like me. Ray gets that. So we're getting around those promoters who don't know the difference, that they didn't see it. But then here we are now, it's like 2 generations later. So these people don't know. So this is that show. This is the show where you get to see it. And I will sing Woman Needs Love like it was originally intended, and what else? Mr. Telephone Man, that was written for me. So I get to put those kind of songs into the system along with You Can't Help But Say I'm Sorry. And to all of you jazz promoters, I have another song called Desert Sun that a lot of people like. It's kind of like my thoughts of me on an instrument, and I'll come do that, as Arnell Carmichael. But we're going to have to say goodbye here. My device here, too, is saying it's too hot. You better stop.
All right. We can
Scott,
wrap it up.
Great conversation.
I really appreciate your time, your thoughts, and great stories, man. And so glad to hear that you are back and still doing it. And, are you guys busy doing a lot of rehearsing? Or?
Hurry up, come here. Yeah, we're just starting our rehearsals and getting it. This is my granddaughter. I want her to say hi. Say hi, Heaven.
Hi.
Say hi to Scott.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Your hands are wet. Okay, go to the towel and get your wipe them up. So yeah, I would do this in as many times as you asked. I want you to have kind of like the exclusive to whatever's new. And I'm having a great time, man, especially now having nobody standing over me. I am my own musical director. So I don't have to listen to all of the, you better do this.
All right, well, I hope you come down to North Carolina soon. And
yeah, we're working on it. We are definitely working on it. You will have free tickets, Scott. You don't have to worry about that. I got you.
All right, appreciate it. Well, just stand by a minute. I'm going to wrap it up, and we'll get out of here.
Okay.
So huge thanks again to my guest, Arnell Carmichael. Any final words?
Stay peace. Just be cool. Just stay relaxed. Chill out. Don't let everything bother you. Have a good day.
All right. Yeah, so thanks again, Arnell Carmichael, a key player of both the group Raydio and on radio waves of the late 1970s and early 1980s. Thank you so much again. Thank you to listeners and viewers. Be sure to look out for upcoming episodes of Truth and Rhythm at funkandstuff.net and on YouTube, other leading providers. Want to hear from you? Drop me an email, scottg@funkandstuff.net. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, who else you want to see. And until next time, on behalf of Mr. Arnell Carmichael, there he is.
Peace out.
This is Scott, Dr. GX Goldfine, as always, saying keep on vibrating to the rhythm of the one.
All right.